What if the person you saved from a storm became the one who later saved you from yourself? The night it all began, the rain didn't fall. It attacked. Sheets of water struck the tin roof of her small cabin like fists, bending the world into a blur of noise and motion. Trees leaned under the weight of the wind, their branches clawing at the windows as if trying to get inside. Emily had been watching that storm crawl closer for hours, following the radar glow on her phone, tracking the angry red mass that now sat right over her little slice of nowhere. Her cabin sat at the end of a dirt road, 2 miles from the nearest mailbox. It wasn't supposed to be anyone's refuge but her own, a place to think, to heal, to hide. But as lightning split the forest open, she saw something move at the edge of the tree line. At first, she thought it was an animal, a shadow hunched against the wind. But then the shadow stood up, a man. He was drenched, head bowed, stumbling like he'd been walking for hours. His jacket clung to him, heavy with water. Emily froze, her heart drumming against her ribs. No one ever came out here. No one even knew this road existed unless they were lost, or looking for something. Another flash of lightning. For a moment, she saw his face, pale, cut by streaks of mud, eyes wide and glassy. Then darkness again. He staggered toward the porch, raised a trembling hand, and knocked. The sound 3 dull knocks was almost swallowed by the storm. She hesitated. A dozen thoughts collided in her head. Don't open it. Call someone. What if he's dangerous? But then the second knock came, weaker this time, and something about it, something fragile, pulled her forward. When she opened the door, wind shoved the rain inside, splattering the floor. The man nearly fell over the threshold. Please, he gasped. Just a minute to get warm. His voice cracked, raw from the cold. She stepped aside without thinking. He stumbled in, dripping on the floorboards, leaving footprints that glistened in the lamplight. Sit, she said, motioning toward the small wood stove. You'll freeze. He nodded, wordless, and collapsed near the fire. Steam rose from his jacket. The storm roared outside like something alive. Emily shut the door, sealing them both in a cocoon of flickering light and rain-snarled darkness. For a long time neither spoke. He was maybe mid-30s, though the lines around his eyes made him look older. His hands shook as he held them to the fire. When he finally turned toward her, there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read, some mixture of exhaustion and disbelief, as if he'd forgotten what warmth felt like. Thank you, he murmured. She handed him a towel and poured a cup of tea. You're lucky you made it this far. The bridge on the main road's been washed out since last week. He nodded slowly. Didn't come by the main road. That answer sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the weather. She wanted to ask more, but his eyes had already drifted closed, the cup half empty in his hand. Within minutes he was asleep, his breathing slow and even. Emily watched him, the way one might watch a stray animal that wandered too close, unsure whether to feel pity or fear. Outside, thunder cracked, rolling over the hills like cannon fire. She told herself she'd let him rest, just until the storm eased up. But something deep inside whispered that this night was going to change everything. By morning the rain had stopped. Mist clung to the trees and the forest smelled like wet earth and pine. When Emily stepped outside, the world looked washed clean, as if the storm had taken all its anger and left behind only silence. Inside, the man was gone. For a moment, panic flared. Then she noticed the folded blanket, neatly placed on the chair. The cup had been rinsed. On the kitchen table sat a small water-stained photograph. It showed a boy 8, maybe 9, smiling beside a woman with tired eyes. On the back, in careful handwriting, were the words, "If you find this, tell her I'm sorry." Days passed. The image haunted her. Who was her? And sorry for what? Emily tried to put it out of her mind, but strange things started happening. Footprints in the mud near the tree line, the faint smell of smoke that vanished when she followed it. Once in the middle of the night, she heard the creak of the porch boards and swore she saw a figure standing just beyond the light, watching. Then, one evening, as she was bringing in firewood, she found him again. He was sitting on the steps, hood pulled low, the same jacket, though now it looked torn and bloodied at the sleeve. He looked up at her as if he'd been waiting. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said quietly. "I just didn't know where else to go." Something about his tone, apologetic, defeated, disarmed her. She motioned him inside. As he thawed by the stove again, she finally asked, "Who's the woman in the photograph?" He stared into the fire for a long time before answering. "My sister. I haven't seen her in over 10 years. What happened?" He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the window as if measuring whether to trust her. Then, softly, "I left when I shouldn't have. Thought I was protecting her. Turns out I was the one she needed protection from." His words hung in the air, heavy, confusing. Emily didn't press. Instead, she gave him soup and silence, both of which he accepted like offerings. Over the next few days, he stayed, fixed the fence, chopped wood, mended things she hadn't realized were broken. The forest felt less lonely with another heartbeat in it. Sometimes she'd catch him staring at the photograph again, tracing the edge of the boy's face with his thumb. Other times he'd walk to the river and sit there for hours, as if waiting for it to reveal an answer. One night, as the firelight flickered against the walls, he said, almost to himself, "Funny how storms can look like the end of the world." but sometimes they're the only thing that brings you home. Emily didn't ask what he meant. She just listened. It wasn't until the second storm weeks later that she began to understand what he was running from. The rain came fast again, but this time she wasn't afraid. They'd weathered worse. She was in the kitchen when headlights flared through the window, two sharp beams cutting through the downpour. A car out here. The man froze. For the first time, she saw fear flash across his face, not the kind born of danger, but of recognition. "They found me," he whispered. Before she could ask who, he was already on his feet, grabbing his jacket. "Wait," she called. "Who's out there?" He shook his head. "You don't want to know." The knock on the door came hard and urgent. "Open up, police." Emily's breath caught. The man's eyes pleaded silently. "I didn't hurt anyone," he said. "Not on purpose." The words chilled her. Not on purpose. Outside, the knocking grew louder. He took a step back from the door, glancing once at the window. Rain streaked down the glass, distorting the blue and red flashes that now pulsed through the trees. "Please," he said, "just let me explain after." And before she could stop him, he slipped out through the back, vanishing into the storm once more. When Emily opened the front door, two officers stood there, soaked and grim. "Ma'am," one said, "we're looking for a man named Daniel Reed. He escaped from county transport 3 nights ago." Her heart pounded. "What did he do?" she asked. The officer exchanged a look with his partner. "Armed robbery," and he hesitated. "One fatality. His sister." The world seemed to tilt. Rain hissed on the porch roof. "That can't be," she whispered. He said, but the rest of her words dissolved into the sound of thunder. The officers searched the property. They found nothing, no footprints, no trace, nothing but the faint smell of wet pine and smoke. When they finally left, Emily stood at the window long after their taillights disappeared. She wanted to feel anger, betrayal, but instead, she felt something stranger. Pity. Outside, the storm eased, and there, faintly illuminated by a flash of lightning, she saw it on the edge of the woods, a figure, motionless, watching. He didn't move, didn't run, just stood there, as if waiting for her to see him. Their eyes met through the rain. Then he raised his hands, low, deliberate, and pointed toward the old shed near the tree line. Before she could react, he turned and disappeared into the darkness. Emily ran to the door, heart in her throat. The storm was fading now, replaced by an eerie calm. She reached the shed, breathless, the door creaking open under her hand. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and something else, something faintly metallic. On the workbench lay a small box. Inside it, a folded letter and another photograph. This one showed Daniel as a teenager, arm around his sister, both smiling at something off camera. The letter began with 5 words that made her blood run cold. "I didn't kill her, I tried to save her." She stared at the words, the ink slightly smeared, the edges of the paper wet from the rain. A distant rumble rolled through the hills, the last sigh of the passing storm. Emily looked toward the forest again, but the figure was gone. Only silence remained. And somewhere within that silence, a question echoed, a question she couldn't shake. Had she just given shelter to a murderer? Or to a man trying to make peace with a truth no one else would believe? The answer, she knew, was still out there, waiting, and soon, she'd have to find it. The forest never truly sleeps. Even after the storm, when the sky had cleared and the rain retreated into the soil, there was a hum in the air, a faint electric residue that clung to everything it touched. Emily stood at the edge of the trees long after Daniel's silhouette had vanished, the letter trembling in her hand, her pulse syncing with the rhythm of dripping water. The world felt unnervingly still, as if the earth itself was waiting to see what she'd do next. Inside, the fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the floorboards. She laid the letter on the table beside the first photograph. 2 pieces of a puzzle she hadn't asked for. "I didn't kill her, I tried to save her." The words burned behind her eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted it more than she should have. There had been something in his eyes that night. Regret, yes, but not guilt. It was the kind of look carried by someone who'd been punished not for what they'd done, but for what they couldn't prove they hadn't. The next morning, mist still wove between the trees, softening the light into a pale gray glow. She barely slept. Every creak in the cabin made her sit up, listening, but there was no sign of Daniel, no footprints this time, no rustle of branches, only silence. She reread the letter as the kettle hissed. Beneath the first line, Daniel had written something else, almost an afterthought. "If you want to know the truth, follow where the river bends east." She's still there. Emily frowned. She pictured the river that wound behind her property, a wide, slow curve of silver that fed into the old mill pond 2 miles down. She's still there. Who? His sister? A grave? She told herself not to go, to leave this alone, but curiosity once stirred doesn't fade, it grows teeth. By midday, the sun had broken through, scattering shards of light through the wet leaves. She packed a thermos of coffee, slipped the letter into her jacket pocket, and followed the trail that led to the river. The ground was soft, her boots sinking into the mud. The river was calmer than she expected, still swollen from the storm but gentle in its flow. She walked along its edge, tracing its turn eastward. There, the trees thinned, revealing a cluster of stones half buried in moss. At first glance, they seemed natural river rocks scattered by time, but one stood out, taller, unnaturally smooth. Emily knelt, brushing away dirt. A name emerged beneath her fingertips. Lena Reed, Daniel's sister. She sat back, breath caught in her throat. The stone was weathered, old enough to have been placed years ago. Fresh flowers rested at its base, their petals damp but intact. Someone had been here recently. A twig snapped behind her. She spun, heart leaping. A woman stood a few paces away, maybe mid-50s, her hair streaked with gray, a woven basket hanging from her arm. She regarded Emily with quiet suspicion. "Didn't mean to scare you," the woman said. "Not many people visit this spot." Emily rose slowly. "You knew her." The woman's gaze softened. Everyone in town knew the Reed family. Tragic business. She nodded toward the grave. "You a friend of hers?" Emily hesitated. "I knew her brother." The woman's face shifted, tightening. "Then you should be careful." Emily's stomach knotted. "You think he killed her?" "I don't think," the woman said flatly. "I remember." She turned her eyes toward the water, voice lowering. "They said it was an argument. He'd been drinking. She tried to stop him from leaving that night. They found her near the bridge the next morning. He vanished, only turned up years later in handcuffs." Emily's pulse quickened. "But he says he tried to save her." "That she, child," the woman interrupted gently. "That man's been lying so long, he probably believes it now." The river murmured between them. The woman adjusted her basket and gave Emily one last look. "Some ghosts don't stay buried. Best you leave this one alone." She walked away, her footsteps fading into the trees. Emily stood there for a long time, staring at the grave. "If you find this, tell her I'm sorry." Maybe Daniel had left that photo as a confession, or maybe as a plea, she didn't know. But something about the fresh flowers bothered her. If Daniel had been in custody until recently, someone else had been tending this place. That night, back at the cabin, the world felt heavier. Every corner of the room carried a memory of his laughter when the kettle whistled, his careful silence when words felt dangerous. She lit the lamp, unfolded the letter again, and noticed something she'd missed before. Faint writing on the back, almost erased by water stains. The storm wasn't what killed her. Her fingers trembled. There had been a storm the night Lena died. Daniel had mentioned it once, half asleep by the fire. It was raining, he'd said. She went out there anyway. Emily grabbed her jacket and flashlight. The wind outside was rising again, whispering through the trees. She followed the dirt road toward the bridge, the one she'd been told was washed out. It wasn't. It stood crooked, wooden planks, slick with moss, the river rushing beneath. The air smelled of damp cedar and rust. On one of the railings she saw a small carving, nearly hidden under the growth. L+D. Lightning flickered far away, turning the river silver. Emily stepped closer, the beam of her flashlight trembling over the wood. Beneath the initials, someone had scratched a date, April 14th, 2013, the night Lena died. She heard it then, a soft splash, something moving in the water. Her light darted across the river's surface. Just the current, she told herself, just the wind. But when she turned to go, another sound cut through the air. A voice. "Emily." She froze. It came from the trees, low, strained, familiar. "Daniel." He stepped into view, dripping wet, eyes hollow. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I found the grave," she whispered. "I found the letter." He looked away, jaw tight. "Then you know why I can't stay." "What happened, Daniel?" she demanded. "If you didn't kill her, tell me the truth." For a moment he said nothing. Rain began to fall again, softly at first. Then he looked up, the pain in his eyes so raw it silenced her. "She fell," he said. "We argued, yes, but she ran before I could stop her. The bridge was soaked. I reached for her, but she slipped. I held her hand for maybe 2 seconds before his voice broke, before the current took her." Emily stared at him. "Why would the police think because I ran?" he said bitterly. "Because when they found her body, my fingerprints were on her wrists from when I tried to pull her up. Because nobody believes a man who disappears." The storm intensified, the river churning beneath them. Emily's flashlight flickered. "Why come back?" she asked. He hesitated. "Because she's not at peace. Because someone's been visiting her grave, leaving things she never owned. Flowers she was allergic to. Tokens that don't belong. Someone wants me to stay a ghost." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "And now you're part of it." A gust of wind howled through the trees. Emily turned, half expecting to see another figure there, but the forest was empty. "Who would do that?" she asked. He opened his mouth to answer, but then his gaze shifted past her. His expression changed, fear, sharp and sudden. "Get down," he hissed. A flash, a deafening crack. The wood beside Emily's head splintered. She dropped to the ground, heart hammering. Another shot echoed, swallowed by thunder. When she looked up, Daniel was gone and vanished into the trees. For a few seconds, all she could hear was rain. Then, in the distance, the crunch of footsteps retreating. She crawled to the edge of the bridge, shaking. There, half buried in mud, was a spent shell casing glinting under the lightning. By the time she made it back to the cabin, her hands were numb, her clothes soaked. She locked the door, dragged a chair under the handle, and sank to the floor. It was nearly dawn when she heard the knock. Soft, gentle, not police. Her heart stuttered. She gripped the poker from the fireplace, crept toward the door. Emily. The voice was female, this time measured, cautious. It's Sheriff Dana. We need to talk. Emily opened the door an inch. The sheriff stood there, rain dripping from the brim of her hat. We found your name in Daniel Reed's old files, Dana said. Wanted to make sure you were safe. I'm fine, Emily lied. The sheriff studied her. You've seen him, haven't you? Emily didn't answer. Dana sighed. He's dangerous, Emily. He escaped transport because he thought someone was after him. Paranoid delusions. Said his sister's death wasn't an accident. But we checked every lead. There's nothing there. Emily swallowed hard. Someone shot at me tonight. Dana's expression darkened. From where? By the bridge. The sheriff glanced toward the woods. Get inside. I'll call it in. As the deputies searched, Emily sat by the window, watching dawn bleed through the trees. Her hand still shook. She replayed the moment in her mind, the direction of the shot, the angle. Whoever fired hadn't been aiming to kill her. They'd been aiming at Daniel. An hour later, Dana returned, face pale. We found footprints, she said. 2 sets. One matches Daniel's boot size. The other smaller, could be female. Emily frowned. We don't know yet, Dana said. But we found this near the riverbank. She handed Emily a small locket, caked in mud. Inside was a photo Lena Reed. On the opposite side, another picture. A man's face Emily didn't recognize. He's not Daniel, she murmured. No, the sheriff said quietly. That's Mark Turner. He was Lena's fiancé. Emily looked up sharply. Fiancé engagement was never public. He disappeared 2 days after Lena died. The air thickened. The puzzle pieces shifted again, refusing to fit. When the sheriff left, Emily sat alone. The locket in her palm. The forest beyond the window shimmered with morning mist, each droplet catching the light like tiny mirrors. Somewhere out there, Daniel was still running from ghosts, from the law, from the truth itself. She turned the locket over. Etched faintly on the back were 2 words. Find me. Her breath caught. It wasn't Daniel's handwriting. It was Lena's. In that moment, Emily understood something she hadn't before. This wasn't just Daniel's story. The storm that bound them all hadn't ended. It was still circling, drawing her in, and whatever waited beneath its calm center was about to rise again. The morning after the shooting, the sky was a dull silver sheet, neither day nor night. The forest held its breath. No birds, no wind, just that eerie stillness that comes when nature is waiting for something to break. Emily sat on the porch steps, a blanket around her shoulders, staring at the locket in her hand. Inside, the 2 faces looked back at her, Lena and the man she'd never met, Mark Turner. Lovers caught in time, their smiles preserved in miniature. On the back, those 2 carved words gleamed faintly in the weak light. Find me. The phrase repeated in her mind until it became a pulse, a rhythm that beat beneath her skin. Find me. It wasn't a request, it felt like a command. By noon, the sheriff had gone, promising to send a search team toward the river once the rain let up. Emily didn't wait. She'd learned that waiting only made questions louder. She packed a small bag, slipped the locket into her pocket, and followed the trail east, past the bend, deeper into the woods where the mist thickened and the air smelled of moss and iron. The trees grew denser the farther she walked, their roots like veins twisting through the earth. The sound of water followed her, steady and low. When she reached the clearing by the old mill pond, she stopped. The mill itself was little more than a skeleton, now half-collapsed walls, broken glass, the rusted wheel leaning at a desperate angle. The pond beside it reflected the pale sky like a tarnished mirror. Something about the place tugged at her memory. Daniel had mentioned it once, in passing, when he'd been fixing her fence. He used to come here as kids. He'd said, our father worked the mill before it shut down. She liked the sound the wheel made, said it reminded her of breathing now. Standing there, Emily could almost hear it, a slow, ghostly rhythm beneath the silence. Near the edge of the pond, something caught her eye, a piece of fabric caught on a root, fluttering in the faint breeze. She knelt and pulled it free, a scarf, faded, patterned with tiny blue flowers. The same pattern she'd seen in the photo of Lena. The air seemed to tighten around her. She turned the scarf over. Mud stained one end, and a small tag, frayed but legible, bore initials stitched in thread. Ella. She rose slowly, scanning the tree line. Daniel, she called. No answer, only the wind. But then a movement, a shadow slipping between trees, too tall to be the sway of branches. She took a step back, heart racing. Who's there? The shadow paused. Then a voice drifted from the woods. You shouldn't have come alone. She froze. The voice was male but unfamiliar, deep and steady, carrying none of Daniel's shakiness. A man emerged from the fog, hands raised, as if to show he meant no harm. He was maybe 40, with a face both tired and alert, the kind of face that had seen too much. I'm Mark, he said quietly. The locket burned cold in her pocket. That's not possible, she whispered. You're supposed to be dead. He smiled sadly. That's what they told everyone. Her breath caught. Then why are you here? Because Daniel wasn't lying. He said Lena's death wasn't an accident and it wasn't his fault. The world tilted. You were engaged to her, Emily said. The sheriff said you disappeared. He nodded. I had to. Someone wanted her silence. And when she died, I was next. The rain began again, soft at first, then heavier. each drop hissing against the pond's surface. Mark looked around nervously, lowering his voice. We thought we could expose something happening at the mill. Records, shipments that didn't make sense. Money moving through this place long after it closed. Lena found proof. That's why she met me here the night she died. Emily felt her pulse in her throat. What kind of proof? He hesitated. Not what, who. Someone powerful. Someone who used that mill as a front. He stepped closer, eyes sharp. You've seen Daniel. Is he alive? She nodded. Good, he murmured. Then maybe it's not too late. Before she could ask more, a crack echoed through the trees. Not thunderwood snapping, heavy footsteps. Mark's head whipped around. They followed you, he hissed. Go now, she demanded. But he was already moving, grabbing her arm, pulling her toward the mill's broken wall. They ducked inside, crouching behind a rusted beam. Through a gap, Emily saw two figures crossing the clearing. One carried a flashlight, the other something longer, a gun. Mark pressed a finger to his lips. The rain intensified, masking their breathing. The men scanned the area, beams sweeping over the ground. One of them stopped near the water's edge, bending down to pick up the scarf Emily had dropped. He turned it over in his hand, muttered something to the other, and the two began searching the perimeter. Mark leaned close. When I tell you, run, follow the river north. There's an old ranger cabin half a mile. You'll be safe there. Emily shook her head. I'm not leaving you. He gave a faint smile. You're not the one they want. Another flash of light swept across the interior. Mark pushed her toward the side exit. Go. She hesitated only a moment before running, feet pounding over wet earth, branches tearing at her sleeves. Behind her, a shout split the air, followed by a gunshot. The sound cracked through the forest like lightning. She didn't look back. The river came into view again, roaring louder now, swollen from the storms. She followed its curve, lungs burning, until she saw the outline of the cabin small, leaning half-eaten by ivy. She stumbled inside and slammed the door shut. Darkness swallowed her. Only her ragged breathing filled the space. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Rain drummed on the roof, steady and relentless. When she finally dared to look outside, the woods were empty again. No footsteps, no voices. She collapsed onto the floor, every muscle trembling. Her hand brushed something beneath the dust, an old photograph pinned to the wall. It showed the mill, decades younger, with a line of workers posing in front. Men and women with blank, weary faces. At the far end, circled faintly in pencil, was a man Emily recognized from a newspaper article she'd read in town weeks earlier, Sheriff Dana's father. The caption beneath the photo had almost faded, but one word was still legible. Supervisor. Emily stared at it, realization dawning slow and cold. If the mill had been the center of whatever Lena uncovered, and the sheriff's family had been tied to it, then the door creaked. Her heart lurched. She turned, hand instinctively reaching for something, anything to defend herself. Emily, it was Daniel. He looked worse than before, pale, drenched, blood streaking one arm. You're hurt, she said, rushing to him. I'm fine, he winced. Where's Mark? He found me. He said Lena's death wasn't what it seemed. Daniel's eyes darkened. Then he told you about the mill. She nodded. He sank to the floor, breathing hard. I tried to tell them. The night she died, she was meeting Mark. She'd found documents, proof of shipments, payoffs. But someone followed her. When I got there, she was already gone. They made sure the story blamed me. Who's they? Daniel. He met her eyes, voice barely a whisper. The same people still running this town. The sheriff's father helped them hide it, and now he looked toward the door. Now Dana's making sure the truth stays buried. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. You think she's behind the shooting? I know she is. Rain pounded the roof harder, a storm rebuilding itself. Daniel pulled something from his pocket, a small flash drive, scratched and water damaged. Lena gave me this the night she died. Said it had everything we needed to expose them. I thought it was destroyed. He handed it to her. Keep it safe. If I don't make it, don't say that, she snapped. But he just smiled faintly. You've already done more for me than anyone else ever would. A noise outside cut him off, engines, tires grinding on gravel. Headlights flared through the trees. Daniel stiffened. They found us. Emily grabbed his arm. We have to go. He shook his head. If we run, they'll never stop. You take the drive. There's a back path through the ravine. It'll lead you to the highway. What about you? I'll hold them off. No, she said, gripping his hand. You've been running your whole life. We do this together. For a moment, he said nothing. Then softly, you remind me of her. Outside, car doors slammed. Voices shouted orders. Flashlights cut through the fog. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. Come on. They slipped out the back, moving through the underbrush. Every sound amplified: the crunch of leaves, the hiss of rain. Behind them, the cabin door burst open, boots pounding inside. Search everywhere. Someone barked. They ducked behind a fallen log, hearts racing. Daniel pressed a finger to his lips. The searchlight swept past, beams slicing through mist. The rain muffled their movements. They crawled downhill toward the ravine. Mud sucked at their feet, slick and cold. Halfway down, Daniel stumbled, clutching his arm. Blood seeped through his sleeve. Leave me, he gasped. You can still... Not a chance, she said, looping his arm around her shoulders. You're not dying here. They reached the bottom of the ravine, where the river cut through like a black vein. A fallen tree formed a makeshift bridge. Emily helped him across, every step trembling. When they reached the other side, a flash of light behind them froze her. Sheriff Dana stood on the opposite bank, her gun raised, rain dripping from her hat. "Don't move." Her voice cracked through the storm. Daniel turned, breathing hard. "Sheriff," Emily shouted over the rain. "You don't have to do this." Dana's face was unreadable. "You don't understand what you're caught in, Emily. This isn't about justice anymore, it's about survival." "Then tell me the truth," Emily demanded. "Did your father kill her?" The sheriff's jaw tightened. "He did what he had to. Lena found something she wasn't supposed to see. My father took the fall to protect people you'll never even meet." Daniel stepped forward. "She was your friend." Dana's expression cracked for a moment, just enough to reveal pain beneath the control. "And that's why I have to finish what she started." To end it, she cocked the gun. Time slowed. The world narrowed to the sound of rain, the gleam of metal, the pulse in Emily's throat. "Don't," Emily whispered. But before the shot could fire, a branch snapped behind the sheriff. She spun too late. A figure emerged from the shadows, striking her arm. The gun clattered to the ground. Marky stood over her, rain streaming down his face, eyes blazing. "Not again," he said. The three of them froze in a triangle of tension: the past, the truth, and everything in between. Dana stared at Mark as if seeing a ghost. "You're supposed to be dead," she whispered. Mark's voice was calm, steady. "So were you. Once, before you started killing the people who reminded you of what your father did." The sheriff's expression hardened. "You don't know anything." "Then tell us," Emily said quietly. "Tell us what really happened that night." Dana hesitated, chest heaving. Then, almost inaudibly, "She wasn't supposed to die. We just wanted the evidence." But she ran, slipped. "My father tried to grab her, so did Daniel." She hit her head before either could save her. The rain softened. The forest seemed to exhale. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, grief, relief, exhaustion, all tangled together. "So it really was an accident," he whispered. "No," Mark said quietly. "It was a cover-up. An accident turned into a lie that destroyed 3 lives." Emily looked between them all, the realization settling heavy in her chest. No one here was innocent, not entirely. Everyone had been both victim and accomplice in some way, bound together by guilt and silence. Dana lowered her head. "It's too late now. The people behind this won't stop." Lightning split the sky. Thunder rolled like an unspoken warning. Emily took a step forward. "Then we make them." For the first time, Daniel looked at her not as a stranger, but as something steadier, something that anchored him. The storm, it seemed, had shifted again. But before any of them could speak, the sound of another engine echoed through the trees, heavier, closer, headlights cutting through the dark. Daniel's expression changed, the color draining from his face. "They found us," he whispered. "But not the sheriff's men." Emily turned toward the glare of light growing brighter through the mist. And in that instant, she understood whatever truth they'd uncovered had only opened the door to something much larger, something none of them were ready to face. The headlights flared white, swallowing them whole. Then came the sound of doors opening, boots hitting the ground, and a single voice, calm, cold, and familiar, calling out through the rain. "Emily, step away from them." She froze. She knew that voice. And as the figure stepped into view, she realized with a sinking, terrible clarity this storm hadn't been Daniel's all along. It had been hers. The voice froze the air around her. The kind of voice that carried not just familiarity, but authority, the sound of someone who had once been trusted completely. Emily turned slowly toward the blinding headlights, rain hissing on the soaked earth, her pulse hammering in her throat. The figure stepped forward, his face coming into focus through the mist. Dr. Hale, her mentor. The man who'd helped her get the teaching position after her breakdown 2 years ago. The man who'd told her to move out here, who'd said solitude would help her heal. Now, he stood in the beam of his own headlights, trench coat clinging to him, expression unreadable. Behind him, 2 men emerged from the SUV, their movements sharp and deliberate. One carried a radio, the other something heavier beneath his jacket. "Emily," Hale said, voice calm but edged. "Step away from them." The rain softened for a moment, the forest holding its breath. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice barely carrying over the hiss of water. He tilted his head, almost pitying. "I should be asking you the same. You've gotten yourself tangled in something you don't understand." Daniel shifted beside her, his body tensing. "He's one of them," he whispered. Hale's eyes flicked to him, then back to Emily. "You've been listening to dangerous people. You think you've found truth, but all you've done is reopen a wound that never healed." "Then tell me what this is," Emily said. "Tell me why you sent me out here, why you told me this place would help me find clarity." He smiled faintly as though speaking to a child. "Because I knew you'd find him, and I needed to see if he still had it." Her heart stuttered. "At what?" Hale nodded toward Daniel's pocket. "The drive." Daniel's hand instinctively moved to his jacket. The 2 men behind Hale took a step forward. "Don't," Hale said gently, raising a hand to stop them. "Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be." Emily's mind spun. "You knew about the mill, about Lena." "I knew everything," Hallie said simply. I was hired to make sure it stayed buried. And for 10 years, it worked until Daniel escaped and ran straight to the one person naive enough to believe him. The words hit her like a slap. You used me. He took a step closer. I protected you. You were falling apart when we met. Remember, you needed purpose, so I gave you one. His stomach twisted. By sending me into a trap, by giving you the illusion of control, he said softly. People heal faster when they think they're choosing their own direction. The storm thickened, rain hammering the ground now, thunder rolling closer. Daniel moved slightly in front of her, his stance protective despite the exhaustion in his body. Mark stayed low near the riverbank, eyes scanning the tree line. You're not leaving with that drive, Hale said, voice tightening. You have no idea what's on it. Daniel's voice was hoarse but steady. Lena died trying to expose it. And you'll die trying to repeat her mistake, Hale replied. The headlights flickered as the wind surged, scattering shadows across the trees. Hale's men began circling wide, their boots squelching through the mud. Emily's pulse quickened, fight or flight colliding inside her. She reached into her pocket and felt the cool metal of the flash drive. It felt impossibly small for something everyone seemed willing to kill for. What's on it, Hale, she demanded. What could possibly be worth all this? He looked at her with something almost like sorrow. Proof that this country isn't what it pretends to be. That some of the people we elect, the ones we trust, have been building empires from the shadows. Lena stumbled onto a ledger: transactions, names, routes. The mill was one of their corridors. She wanted to make it public. My employers couldn't allow that. His tone didn't change. He spoke as though describing the weather. You killed her, Emily whispered. Not me, he said. But my silence made it possible. The words hung in the rain, heavy as stones. Mark stepped out from the dark, water streaming down his face. You think this ends with another lie? Hale turned, and in that instant, the world fractured. Daniel lunged. Mark shouted. Hale's men raised their weapons. The forest erupted in motion. Gunfire cracked through the night, deafening in its suddenness. Emily hit the ground, mud splattering her face. Daniel grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the trees. Run. They stumbled through the undergrowth, flashes of light slicing behind them. Branches clawed at their clothes. Roots caught their feet. The sound of pursuit followed, boots pounding, shouts echoing. They reached the edge of the ravine again. The fallen tree bridge swayed under the storm's assault. Daniel pushed her forward. Go. What about Mark? He'll cover us. She hesitated only a second before crossing, every step slippery and unstable. Halfway across, she glanced back. Hale's men were closing in. Mark fired once, twice, and one of them fell. The other ducked behind a tree. Hale stood behind them, perfectly still, watching her like a hawk. When Daniel reached her side, they ran again, following the river north. The rain became a wall of water. The forest blurred. They didn't stop until the roar of the river gave way to a strange, rhythmic hum. Emily turned her head, realizing where they were. The hydro plant, the place where the mill's old water lines had been rerouted years ago. Concrete walls jutted out of the hillside, graffiti bleeding down their surfaces. A faint orange light glowed inside, flickering. Daniel leaned against the wall, catching his breath. We can't keep running. We can't fight them either, she said. Then we use this. He held up the flash drive. Whatever's on here, we make sure it's seen. The hum of the turbines below vibrated through the floor. Emily's eyes caught a small maintenance office in the corner. Inside a dusty computer, the screen faintly alive with static light. They hurried in. Daniel plugged in the drive. Hands shaking, the monitor flickered, then bloomed with folders. Dates, names, offshore accounts, transport routes, even signatures. It's real, Emily breathed. It's all real. Daniel looked at her, exhaustion etched deep into his face. Lena didn't die for nothing. She touched his arm. Then we finish it. A sound outside cut her words short, the crunch of gravel, the slam of a car door. Hardly they could hear his footsteps before they saw him, steady and slow. Daniel, Hale called, voice echoing off the concrete walls. You can't win. That data won't make it out of here alive. You'll just die holding it. Daniel typed faster, breath shallow. Almost done. It's uploading to where? The network, he said. Everything you tried to hide, it's going public. Hale's shadow filled the doorway. He stepped inside, gun raised, eyes hard. Step away from the console. Emily moved instinctively in front of Daniel. Don't, please, Hale sighed. You think he's a hero. You think this will fix anything. You'll start a war you can't control. Then let it burn, Daniel said. For the first time, Hale's mask cracked. His voice rose, not angry, but desperate. You don't understand what you're unleashing. You think it's about money or power. This isn't corruption, it's infrastructure. Pull one thread, and the whole system collapses. You'll destroy lives, economies, everything. Daniel didn't stop typing. Maybe that's the only way to rebuild it. Hale took a step closer, gun steady. Don't make me do this then. Don't, Emily whispered. Lightning flashed through the high windows, bleaching the room white. For an instant, everything froze. The man with the gun, the fugitive at the keyboard, the woman caught between them. Then the power cut out. Darkness swallowed the room. The hum of the turbines faded. A single red emergency light blinked to life. The computer screen went black. Daniel's voice broke the silence. It's gone. Upload complete. Hale's gun didn't move. His face was unreadable in the red glow. You have no idea what you've done. The door burst open. Mark stumbled in, one arm bleeding, his face pale. They're coming. More cars. Hale's expression hardened. Then none of you leave. He raised the gun. Emily felt time slow again, the rain outside, the flicker of red light, Daniel's hand brushing hers as he moved to shield her. The gun went off. The sound echoed through the hollow chamber, reverberating like a scream swallowed by concrete. Daniel fell to his knees. Emily caught him before he hit the ground, her hands slick with blood. No, she gasped. No, stay with me. Hale stepped back, eyes wide, as if he hadn't meant for it to happen. I told you, he said softly. You don't understand. Mark lunged, tackling him to the ground. The gun skittered away, clattering across the floor. Hale fought back, but Mark pinned him, fury blazing in his eyes. Emily pressed her hands against Daniel's wound, her tears mixing with the rain that leaked through the ceiling. His breathing was shallow, every exhale a battle. Emily, he whispered. The file. It's out there now. She nodded through sobs. You did it. He smiled faintly. Then maybe it was worth it. Outside, sirens began to wail, distant but growing. Blue and red lights flickered against the rain-soaked concrete. Mark stood over Hale, chest heaving. They'll bury this, he said. Even after all this. Emily looked at Daniel's still face, then at the dark computer. Something inside her hardened, quiet but absolute. Then we don't let them. She stood, soaked, shaking, a strange calm washing over her. The storm outside raged on, but she no longer feared it. It was as if all the noise, all the chaos, had become part of her heartbeat. Hale laughed weakly from the floor. You think you can fight the people I work for? Emily stared at him. I'm not going to fight them. She picked up the gun, her voice steady. I'm going to expose them. The sirens grew louder, echoing through the valley. Hale's men would be here any second. Mark met her eyes, nodding once. Then we ended our way, he said. Emily looked down at Daniel's hand, still warm in hers. He gave me shelter from the storm, she murmured. Now it's my turn. The red light flickered again, slower now, the rhythm of a dying heartbeat. The room felt suspended between seconds past and present colliding, truth and consequence waiting to explode. And as the sirens reached the edge of the plant, as the storm pressed its weight against the world, Emily stepped forward into the light, ready to face whatever came next. Then, through the chaos, a sound broke the silence, the faint hum of the computer coming back to life. The screen flickered, then filled with static, before a single line of text appeared, glowing through the red light. Transmission incomplete. Emily's breath caught. It wasn't over. The words pulsed on the screen like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Transmission incomplete. Emily stared, frozen. The glow from the monitor painted her face in pale blue light, flickering like lightning caught inside her. Outside, the sirens swelled, closing in from every direction. The storm hadn't eased, it had only grown heavier, pressing down on the hydro plant until it seemed the walls themselves might collapse. Daniel's body lay still beside her, blood spreading like ink through the cracks in the concrete. His face was strangely peaceful, as though the chaos around them no longer reached him. For a fleeting moment, the world went silent. Just her breath, the rain, the faint hum of electricity struggling to return. Mark stepped closer, his voice low. If it didn't send, we still have the drive. Hale laughed, a weak, broken sound. His lip was bleeding, eyes glassy but alive. You really think it's that simple? You think you can just upload truth into the world and watch it change? He coughed, spitting red. It doesn't work like that. Truth needs believers. And believers need something more than proof, they need pain. Emily turned toward him, the gun still in her hand. You've caused enough pain. He smiled faintly. So have you. For a second, she didn't understand. Then he nodded toward Daniel's still body. You led him here. You let him hope. You made him believe the world could change. Her grip on the gun trembled. He did change it. Hale's eyes softened, almost pitying. No, he just gave you a story. The words hit harder than any bullet. A story. That's all it would ever be unless she made it more. Outside, the sirens became a roar. Lights flashed through the cracks in the walls, cutting across the dark like searchlights sweeping through a battlefield. Mark stepped toward the console, tapping at the keyboard. Systems locked, he said. Looks like the main line's fried. We can't finish the upload here. Emily's mind raced. There's a relay up the hill. The communications tower. Mark's brow furrowed. That's a mile away. She looked toward the stormlit windows. Then we run. Hale laughed again, bitter this time. You'll never make it out alive. Emily met his eyes. You said it yourself. Truth needs pain. She turned and ran. The wind hit her like a war when she stepped outside. The night was alive with color and sound, the flashing red and blue, the sheets of rain, the thunder rolling through the valley like drums of war. Mark followed close behind, clutching the drive. Behind them, the plant glowed faintly, its red emergency light fading to black. They cut through the forest, mud splattering their legs, breath coming in ragged bursts. The path to the tower wound upward, narrow and slick. Every few seconds, Emily looked back, expecting to see Hale's men closing in. Halfway up the hill, a car engine revved behind them. Headlights sliced through the rain. "Go," Mark shouted. They scrambled higher, slipping on the rocks. Emily's chest burned, lungs screaming, but she didn't stop. Not now, not after everything. At the crest of the hill, the tower loomed, a rusted skeleton clawing at the storm. Lightning flashed behind it, making its silhouette blaze against the sky. The wind howled through the steel beams, carrying the smell of ozone and wet earth. Mark reached the base first, fumbling with the hatch at the bottom of the control unit. Sparks flew when he pulled at the wires. "I can reroute power from the generator," he shouted over the storm. "We just need a few minutes." Emily looked down. The hill shadows moved below, flashlights cutting through the trees. Hale's men were coming fast. "Do it," she said. "I'll hold them off." Mark looked up, hesitation in his eyes. "Emily, go." She turned and faced the darkness, gun trembling slightly in her grip. Every breath came out as mist. The rain had soaked her hair to her skin, her clothes heavy and cold, but her eyes were steady now. When the first figure emerged from the trees, she fired once, not to kill, but to warn. The shot cracked across the valley, swallowed by thunder. "Stop," she shouted. "It's over." They didn't. The beams of light kept climbing the hill, relentless, cutting closer. She could hear Hale's voice among them, steady and commanding. "Bring me the drive," he called. "Alive, if possible." Mark shouted something behind her. She couldn't make it out. The storm drowned everything. She fired again, the flash illuminating the trees for a fraction of a second. More figures appeared. Too many. Then a blinding bolt of lightning struck the tower above, splitting the sky open. The metal groaned, the air crackling with electricity. The shockwave threw her to the ground. When she looked up, the tower was glowing faintly alive with power. Mark was yelling from the control unit. "It's online. Emily, get up here." She stumbled to her feet, grabbing the drive from his hand. "Tell me where to plug it." He pointed to a port at the base of the transmitter, sparks spitting from it. "Right there, just do it fast." She jammed the drive in. The tower lights flared, screens on the console flickering back to life. Data streamed across them, lines of code, transmissions routing, signals bouncing from node to node, then connection established. The final upload began. The storm seemed to hold its breath. Below, Hale appeared at the foot of the hill, his trench coat whipping in the wind, his face lit by the glow of the tower. He looked almost spectral, half human, half shadow. "Emily," he shouted, voice echoing up through the rain. "If you send that, you'll kill everything you know. You'll collapse what's left of the world you're trying to save." She looked down at him, eyes burning. "Then maybe it needs to fall." The screens flashed again. 97%, 98%, 99%. Hale drew his gun. Mark shouted, "Get down." The shot cracked. Emily flinched, but not from pain. The bullet struck the metal beside her, ricocheting harmlessly. Hale stumbled forward, rain streaming from his hair, fury and grief twisting his face. "Do you even know what you're fighting for?" he shouted. "You think truth brings peace. It brings chaos. It burns everything." She looked down at him, her voice low and steady. "Then let it burn." The screen blinked, 100% transmission complete. The tower's light surged bright white, casting the entire valley in brilliance. The storm roared, wind spiraling through the steel, and then no thunder, no sirens, just the hum of power, steady and low, as if the world itself had exhaled. Hale sank to his knees, gun falling from his hand. He looked small, now defeated, drenched, a man who had finally seen the thing he spent his life trying to contain. Emily stepped down the slope, rain washing the blood from her hands. "It's done," she said softly. He looked up at her, trembling. "You don't understand. They'll come for you now. They'll come for everyone. Let them." Hale's eyes glistened. "You think the world will thank you? You think Daniel would?" Emily froze. The name struck like lightning again. Daniel, his voice, his warmth, the way he'd smiled even in fear. She remembered his last words. "It's out there now." "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. He would. Hale lowered his head, whispering something she couldn't hear. Then he stood and walked into the rain, disappearing into the forest like a shadow dissolving into the night. Mark approached her slowly, his face pale and hollow. "It's out," he said. "Every channel, every network. The data's spreading faster than anyone can stop it." Emily nodded. "Then it's not our secret anymore." They stood there for a long time, watching as the storm began to fade. The wind softened, and the sky above the valley cracked open, revealing the faintest hint of dawn. The light spilled over the treetops, catching on the wet ground, turning puddles into mirrors. Emily looked out over the landscape below, the hydro plant, the winding river, the ruins of the mill in the distance. It all looked different now, as if the truth itself had changed the air. Mark spoke quietly. "What happens now?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze lingered on the horizon, where the first thin rays of sunlight touched the storm clouds. "Now," she said, "the world decides what to believe." For a moment, neither of them moved. The tower hummed behind them, a pulse of light running up its steel frame like veins coming alive. Somewhere far below, faint sirens still echoed, but they sounded different now. Less like pursuit, more like aftermath. Emily turned back, toward the hill, her steps heavy, slow. Mark followed, silent. As they descended, the sky brightened. The storm had done its work, ripped everything open, washed it all clean. When they reached the bottom, Emily looked one last time at the plant. Through the broken windows, she could see the computer's glow flickering weakly. Still alive, still transmitting. She whispered, almost to herself, "He gave me shelter from the storm." Then she looked up toward the dawn. "Now he's my safe place." The light grew stronger, spreading across the valley. The last of the thunder rolled away, leaving only the sound of the river below, steady, endless, like the world starting over. And somewhere deep within the static of 1,000 screens across the world, the transmission continued to play names, numbers, faces, truth unfolding in real time. The storm had passed, but the reckoning had just begun. The river moved slowly now, swollen from the storm but gentle again, its surface glinting beneath the new sun. Mist rose from it in thin, ghostly veils that wrapped around the trees like a secret the valley didn't quite want to let go of. The air smelled of wet pine and earth and the faint trace of smoke from somewhere far away. Everything was quieter, softer. Emily sat on the riverbank, her boots half buried in mud, her reflection trembling on the water's surface. She hadn't slept. The adrenaline had drained out of her hours ago, leaving only a strange stillness behind, a hollow kind of peace that felt both foreign and necessary. The world hadn't ended, though part of her had expected it to. Mark sat a few feet away, patching the cut on his arm with strips torn from his jacket. His movements were slow, deliberate. Neither of them had spoken much since they'd come down from the tower. Words felt too small for what had happened. Somewhere out there she knew the transmission was spreading. The files Daniel had died for were no longer theirs. They belonged to everyone now. People would be waking up to notifications, seeing the flood of information, feeling that jolt of disbelief that comes when a hidden truth cracks open the surface of ordinary life. The world would argue about it, deny it, twist it, but it would never again be ignorant. "Do you think he knew?" Mark asked suddenly. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Emily looked up. "Daniel?" "Yeah." He stared out at the water. That he wasn't going to make it, that all this would cost him. She thought of Daniel's eyes in the red light of the hydro plant, how steady they'd been even when everything was falling apart. She thought of the way he'd said it's out there now, like he already knew what it meant. "Yes," she said softly. "I think he knew, and I think he made peace with it." Mark nodded, staring down at the bandage. "People will make stories out of him, turn him into something he wasn't." "Maybe," she said, "but maybe that's how truth survives." In stories for a long time, they just listened to the river. Up the hill, the tower still stood, leaning slightly from the lightning strike, but unbroken. Its metal glinted in the morning light like a scar that had healed without hiding itself. Emily wondered if Hale was still alive out there in the woods or if he'd disappeared for good. She didn't feel hatred toward him anymore, just a tired kind of understanding. He was a man who had spent his whole life trying to control the chaos of truth, to hold it in his hands and shape it into something clean. But truth was never clean. It was wild, fluid, unpredictable. It didn't belong to anyone. The sound of distant engines drifted through the trees, vehicles moving along the old road that wound into the valley. Mark stood, scanning the horizon. "They'll be coming soon." Reporters, government people, whoever's left trying to control the story. Emily didn't move. "Let them come. You don't want to hide." She shook her head. "There's no point. The world already knows my name. Someone will find a way to twist it. Say I was part of it. Say Daniel was lying. But none of that matters anymore." He studied her face for a moment. "So what do? We live," she said simply. The words surprised her as they left her mouth. For months, maybe years, she'd been surviving, not living, always waiting for something to make sense, for the storm to stop long enough for her to catch her breath. But now she realized it wasn't about the storm ending. It was about learning how to breathe inside it. Mark sat back down beside her. "You think people will listen to what's been released?" "Some will," she said. "Some won't, but you can't force people to wake up. You just give them the choice." He nodded slowly. The wind moved through the trees, shaking droplets loose from the branches, each one catching the light before it fell. The world was waking up again. Emily took the flash drive from her pocket, the same one Daniel had carried through rain and blood and fear. It was cracked now, bent slightly from the fall, but the data inside had already done its work. She turned it over in her hand, the small piece of metal that had changed everything, and felt the weight of it, the strange irony of how something so small could carry so much. She stood and walked to the edge of the river. Mark watched her silently. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded. "It's done what it needed to." She held the drive for one last moment, then opened her hand. The current caught it immediately, pulling it under, spinning it once before carrying it downstream. It glinted once in the sunlight before vanishing into the depths. As she watched it disappear, something inside her loosened. The drive had been Daniel's burden, then hers. Now it belonged to the river too. Mark exhaled, almost a laugh. "You really are done with all this?" She smiled faintly. "Not done. Just ready to start over." They began walking upriver, following the water's curve through the valley. Birds had started to return, their songs hesitant but growing stronger with each minute. The forest looked different now, not menacing, just alive. As they walked, Emily thought about Hale's last words. Truth needs believers, and believers need pain. Maybe he was right. Maybe truth only survived because of those willing to bleed for it. But she also thought of Daniel's words, the ones he'd spoken in that final breath. Then maybe it was worth it. Was it worth it? She didn't know. The cost of truth was always measured differently by those who paid it and those who benefited from it. But when she looked at the light breaking over the trees, when she felt the air clean against her skin, she thought, yes, maybe it was. They reached the clearing where her cabin once stood. It had been torn apart by the storm, roof collapsed, windows shattered, the door hanging off its hinges. But the sight didn't fill her with loss. It felt honest, in a way. Like something that had been stripped down to its bones so it could begin again. She stepped inside. The floor creaked beneath her boots. Water pooled near the hearth. Her books lay scattered and soaked, pages curling like wilted petals. She picked one up. It was Lena's journal, the one Daniel had found at the mill. The ink had bled, but one line was still legible across the page. The world doesn't fall apart when we see the truth. It falls apart when we refuse to. She ran her fingers over the words. The letters smudged under her touch, blending into something unreadable, like a memory fading but never truly gone. Mark leaned against the doorway. You keeping it? She closed the book and set it on the mantel. No, I'm leaving it here. He nodded. What'll you do now? She looked out the broken window toward the mountains where the light had turned gold. Maybe go somewhere quiet, maybe write, maybe just listen for a while. The words felt strange, but right. He smiled faintly. You'll disappear. You know, once the noise starts, people will move on. They always do, I know, she said. But disappearing isn't the same as being gone. The sky was clearing completely now, and the last of the storm clouds drifted east, slow and heavy, dissolving into the horizon. The air shimmered with that rare kind of silence that only follows chaos, the silence that feels earned. Emily stepped outside one last time and looked down at the valley. The tower was just a thin line now against the distance, but she could still see its glint, like a reminder that some truths don't vanish, they echo. Somewhere below, a single beam of light caught the river where the flash drive had sunk. It was impossible, but for a second she thought she saw just a shimmer of silver beneath the surface, still moving, still alive. She closed her eyes and let the sound of the river fill her. It wasn't the same sound as before, or maybe she wasn't the same person hearing it. In the distance, she thought she heard Daniel's voice, not in words, but in feeling. That quiet steadiness, that sense of something sheltering her again. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel lost. The storm had taken so much safety, in a sense, illusion, but it had also left her with something she'd forgotten. She could have peace. Not the kind that comes from calm skies, but the kind that grows inside you when you've faced the worst and learned how to stay standing. Mark walked a few paces ahead, then turned back, waiting. She followed him up the path, the light catching in her hair, the wind tugging at her jacket. When they reached the ridge, she paused to look back one final time. The valley stretched wide and endless below, the tower gleaming faintly in the morning haze. It looked small now, almost insignificant against the expanse of green and gold. But she knew that somewhere out there beyond the mountains, beyond the news headlines, beyond the news, the truth they'd set free was still moving, like a current finding its own way through the world. Maybe that was all anyone could do. Set something free and hope it reached the right hearts. She turned toward the horizon. The sun was higher now, warm against her face. In the end, she thought, storms don't destroy us, they reveal who's willing to stand in the rain. And as the wind carried the last traces of thunder away, Emily took a breath that felt like beginning. Somewhere beneath the sound of the river and the birds and the waking world, a question lingered, quiet, persistent, unanswerable. When the storm gives you shelter, what do you owe it in return? She didn't know yet, but for the first time, she was ready to find out. The camera of the mind would pull back now, slowly, steadily rising above the valley where truth and ruin and rebirth had all shared the same ground. The tower glinting like a monument to everything that had been risked. The river winding like a silver thread through the trees. And two figures walking into the morning, small against the enormity of what they'd survived, but not afraid. The storm was over, and somewhere, beneath all that sky, a new one was just beginning.